Okay, so picture this. Google's newest robot checks the local weather online, it sees rain,
Uh,
and then it decides all by itself to grab an umbrella and pack it in a bag for a trip.
wow.
That's some pretty advanced decision making, right? Using live web data in real time.
It really is a genuinely impressive step for, physical machines. Maybe not a total revolution, but
Yeah.
definitely a big stride towards general intelligence out there in the messy real world.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at the snapshot of AI's, frankly, incredibly fast maturation. We're pulling out the key insights from the source material you've shared with us.
Yeah, and these sources, they really show that AI isn't just improving, the challenges, the risks, they're scaling up dramatically too.
So we've broken this down into three main parts for you. First up, the tech breakthroughs. We're talking about the shift to genuinely general-purpose robots. Think laundry and logic.
Then we really have to get into the tougher stuff, the high-stakes world of security and, well, legal battles. We're talking actual biothreats emerging and these huge multi-billion-dollar lawsuits over AI training data.
And finally, we'll dig into this really interesting report on what's being called the developer paradox. It's fascinating data showing how developers are now super dependent on AI tools they openly say they don't entirely trust.
Right. It's like this hidden fragility inside a tool everyone's using for productivity.
Exactly.
Okay, let's get into it, starting in the lab.
All right, let's ground this in the physical world first. Google DeepMind, they just showed off Gemini Robotics 1.5, and I have to say, this one feels like it could be the ChatGPT moment, but, for machines that have to actually do things outside a clean lab.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the perfect way to put it. The absolute key here is handling, quote, real-world messiness. We're finally moving beyond those super-controlled single-task setups.
Yeah.
And the sources gave some really concrete examples, complex ones that show some deep planning going on.
So what were those examples? Tell us about them.
Well, okay, folding laundry. Sure, we've seen robots fold laundry, but this wasn't just folding. It was classifying items, sorting them into different baskets based on color, type. That takes planning, multi-step thinking.
Right. Not just a simple repetitive motion.
And it's not just using its own internal logic either.
Yeah.
The really crucial bit, I think, is its ability to tap into Google search, like mid-task.
Mid-task. How did that work?
So they demoed it sorting recycling. But get this, it was sorting based on the specific, often really complicated recycling rules for that particular city. Rules it pulled directly from the web just minutes before starting the task.
Okay, that's different. That's autonomous adaptation. It's using outside information on the fly.
Precisely. Robots aren't isolated islands anymore. They can learn and adapt from the world's information in real time.
And what's really interesting is the tech upgrade that makes this possible. Because the older Gemini robotics models, they could basically do one thing, one time. Change the lighting, move the object a bit, and boom, you often had to retrain the whole system.
Yeah, that was the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Now we've shifted to multi-step planning, and this is key, reusable motion logic.
Reusable motion logic.
Think of it like having basic Lego blocks of motor skills, fundamental movements. And the AI can now quickly stack and reconfigure these blocks for totally new goals. That's what gives it that real-world flexibility.
Okay, that makes sense. And this is where it potentially gets really transformative for robotics, right? This idea of motion transfer.
Absolutely critical, motion transfer.
Yeah.
It's the ability to take skills learned on one specific robot, say a simple industrial arm, learning to flip a pancake, and instantly apply that complex skill, that knowledge of pancake flipping, to a completely different robot, like a humanoid bot, totally different body, different joints.
So you skip potentially thousands of hours of retraining for the new robot form. You just transfer the concept of the skill.
Exactly. The concept, the logic. Whoa. Just imagine scaling that up. That future-proofs training efforts massively. You teach one machine a complex task, like operating a drill press, and suddenly every robot, regardless of its shape or size, can potentially do it. That could drastically cut down the time to mass adoption.
That's a huge deal. So if the tech is getting this good, what's the big remaining hurdle? What does Google themselves still admit is preventing, say, mass consumer adoption right now?
It still comes down to the sheer unpredictability of the real world.
Yeah.
Handling all the messy, unexpected edge cases.
Yeah.
That remains the biggest challenge.
That makes total sense. The real world is, well, it's messy. Okay, let's pivot now, pretty hard, to the risks and the market side of things. Because it feels like the security and legal landscape is moving even faster than the core technology.
It's almost dizzying, isn't it? So on the feature side, you saw OpenAI drop ChatGPT Pulse.
Yeah.
This thing basically uses AI to cook up personalized briefings for you while you sleep.
Right.
Delivers them as these little interactive cards when you wake up. It's definitely pushing AI towards being like a personal chief of staff.
And Meta jumped in with something called Vibes, which sounds like basically a TikTok feed, but just for AI-generated videos.
Pretty much. And it encourages users to remix and share this stuff, trying to capture that viral creative energy for AI content.
So while the big guys are adding features, the sources also mention Elon Musk's XAI making a kind of interesting market move.
Yeah, undercutting the competition. Offering their Grok model to the U.S. government for just 42 cents. Now, okay, it's framed partly as a joke, but it's also a very clear signal, right?
Yeah.
A challenge to the pricing and dominance of OpenAI and Anthropic, the established players.
Mm-hmm. But while these market games are playing out, the actual security risks in the AI infrastructure are really popping up. Salesforce, for instance, just had to patch a critical AI bug. This one involves something called prompt injection.
Right, prompt injection. So for anyone listening who isn't deep in the security weeds, that's basically tricking the AI. A hacker feeds it text, not as a normal question, but as a hidden command, to make the AI do something it shouldn't, like bypass its own safety rules or access data.
And in the Salesforce case, it let attackers potentially steal valuable customer relationship management, CRM, data. It really highlights how traditional security like firewalls can fail when the AI itself is the weak point. The model can be inherently leaky.
It's a massive risk for companies. But maybe the most unsettling thing in these sources was the biothreat angle.
Yeah, that stood out. A Stanford lab apparently used AI to successfully design new working viruses.
And crucially, some of these AI-designed viruses were reportedly stronger, more virulent than the natural ones they were based on.
The report framed this as an immediate critical threat, and it specifically mentioned that U.S. response systems just aren't prepared for AI-created biothreats. The speed, the accessibility, it completely changes the game for pathogen creation.
It absolutely demands urgent global attention and regulation that, frankly, doesn't seem to exist yet. Now, shifting gears slightly to the legal side, the financial costs are becoming astronomical.
No kidding. Anthropic, a major AI player, got hit with this potential $1.5 billion wake-up call from authors suing over copyright.
$1.5 billion.
Yeah. That figure just underscores the colossal legal liability tied up in training these large language models on potentially copyrighted material.
That number, $1.5 billion,
Yeah.
it signals we are definitely past the move fast and break things phase for AI development.
Right.
Companies now have to factor in potentially massive legal settlements just as a cost of doing business, or they need to fundamentally rethink how they source training data.
Yet, despite all this risk, the money keeps flowing into certain areas, particularly secure enterprise AI, Cohere, which focuses specifically on that secure niche.
Right.
They just raised another $100 million, hitting a $7 billion valuation. They're clearly betting that businesses will pay a premium for AI solutions that address these security vulnerabilities and legal landmines.
Makes sense. So thinking about those two major risks we just discussed, the critical software bug at Salesforce allowing data theft and the engineered viruses coming out of Stanford,
Yeah.
which one holds the greater immediate threat potential?
Based on the sources, the possibility of AI-borne biothreats demands the most urgent global attention right now. Okay, before we dive into that developer trust paradox, let's just take a quick pause. Placeholder for sponsor message.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
So we really need to unpack the data coming out of Google Cloud's latest DORA report, because it paints this picture of what we're calling the core paradox. AI is becoming absolutely essential business infrastructure. Yet, a significant chunk of the users who rely on it daily admit they don't fully trust what it produces.
The numbers really do seem contradictory at first glance. Usage is, well, almost universal now in development. 90% of developers are using AI copilots regularly.
90%.
Yeah. And often spending around 2 hours per day working alongside these AI assistants. It's deeply embedded in the workflow, foundational.
But then you hit the trust gap, and it's pretty stark. 30%, nearly 1 in 3 of those same developers, said they trust the AI's output only a little, or worse, not at all.
Yeah.
Think about that. A third of the workforce relies heavily on software they fundamentally distrust.
It's incredibly relatable, though, isn't it? I mean, we all kind of experience this.
Oh, absolutely. I still wrestle with prompt drift myself.
Right.
Regularly.
And, for listeners maybe not living in the code daily, prompt drift It's that really frustrating thing where during a long chat with an AI,
Hmm.
it starts to forget the original instructions. It loses the context, the rules you set up at the very beginning.
Mm.
And that lack of reliable consistency, that's a genuine vulnerability when you're relying on it for professional work.
So, given that level of distrust, that drift, why hasn't it killed adoption? The practical upsides must just be overwhelming that feeling.
They really are. The data shows the benefits clearly win out over the fear of, the AI making stuff up or getting things wrong. 80% of developers reported clear productivity gains. Huge number.
80%, wow.
And 59% said it actually improved the quality of their code. So the overall feeling seems to be a very pragmatic, okay, I don't fully trust this thing, but there's absolutely no way I'm going back to working without it.
That really is the definition of essential infrastructure, isn't it? It's somewhat fragile, maybe unreliable at times, but it's become irreplaceable. The speed boost is worth the extra effort of constantly checking its work.
Exactly. And because this uh, slightly fragile tool is now critical infrastructure, you see companies like Google responding. They're pushing to standardize how it's used. They released this thing called the Dora AI capabilities model.
Right, the Dora model. What does that actually do?
It's basically a framework. It
Yeah.
lays out 7 best practices for development teams using AI effectively. Things like how to test AI outputs responsibly, integrate security checks, ensure consistent deployment processes, stuff like that.
So it's a move towards governance, putting guardrails in place.
Precisely. It signals that companies get it now. They realize they can't just leave it up to individual developers to figure out how to manage all these risks and inconsistencies on their own. They need common standards.
Okay, so thinking about that push for standards, why is standardizing AI use? With frameworks like Dora, why is that so immediately critical for big organizations right now?
Because essential AI infrastructure requires unified best practices to manage risk and output consistency.
Okay, so let's pull back for a moment and just recap the big ideas from this deep dive. It feels like we landed on three key takeaways that really define this complex, fast-moving moment in AI's development.
Yeah, I think so. First, on the robotics front, Gemini showed us this really sophisticated multi-step planning
Right.
using live web data. That's a huge leap, right, towards robots being genuinely general-purpose tools actually integrated into the real world.
Right. Laundry and logic achieved. Second, the stakes around security and law are just skyrocketing. We've got the emergence of potentially AI-designed biothreats on one hand, and these absolutely massive multi-billion-dollar legal fights over copyrighted training data on the other. The risks are immense now.
And finally, that developer paradox.
Yeah.
AI adoption isn't really being driven by blind faith or trust. It's driven by hard results. Productivity gains. Developers are using these tools because they make them faster, more effective, even if they have to constantly double-check the output. So the tech is shifting incredibly fast from being this novel, experimental thing to being critical,
Yeah.
but still kind of fragile infrastructure.
It's a really fascinating and maybe precarious balance point we're at. So building on that advanced planning we saw with Gemini, the robot checking the weather, deciding autonomously to pack an umbrella,
Yeah.
and connecting that capability with the escalating threats we discussed, like biothreats and the huge legal risks, we wanted to leave you, the listener, with this thought to chew on.
Considering how complex and autonomous these AI systems are becoming, what do you think will be the first genuinely helpful, but also ethically challenging autonomous decision AI makes for humanity in the next year or so?
Yeah, something complex, something vital, maybe something that feels just a little bit scary, involving real-world consequences.
What's that first big autonomous ethically tricky choice going to be?
Something to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into your sources today. As always, we encourage you to keep exploring these incredibly important topics.